with Tuesday, but the cloud will build and again we'll see a few showers developing, especially towards parts of Wales, the Midlands into northern England, and those showers continuing across parts of northern Scotland as well. A lot of cloud by the end of the afternoon then, and temperatures reaching the low to possibly the mid-20s in the south, and again the high 20s, or the high teens I should say, and around 20 Celsius across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Into the evening, and the cloud cover continues to thicken across central areas with a few more showers, but the weather remains fairly changeable with further showers to come on Friday and Saturday. It turns hotter in the southeast.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the big issues of the day and we look at them in depth. Nothing is off the table and no one will be cancelled for saying what they think. Keeping me company today is Benjamin Lockney, who's a research fellow at the Bow Group, a conservative think tank. And here's what we're discussing on the show. They talked over each other, they clashed on taxes, they tried to out-Brexit one another and compared the schools they went to. The gloves are off in the battle for number 10, but who won last night's bout? Uppercut Rishi or left hook Liz? He was a prominent figure in Northern Ireland politics, responsible for the peace agreement that ended 35 years of violence. Lord David Trimble, former First Minister and Unionist, has died. We look at his legacy and his unfinished business on Brexit. Water, water everywhere, or maybe not, as the National Drought Group meets to discuss how to deal with a parched Britain this summer. And could the Lionesses roar? England's women's team are in action tonight in the semi-finals of the Euros. That's what we're kicking about for the next hour. You can aim your shots at gbviews@gbnews.uk or shout from the Twitter terraces at GB News. First, though, it's time for the GB News headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's 2:02. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The two candidates to become the UK's next Prime Minister will face off again tonight, following a heated first head-to-head debate. The pair traded blows over tax, with the Foreign Secretary saying Rishi Sunak would lead the country into recession. But the former Chancellor claimed there was nothing conservative about Liz Truss's approach.
Under my plans, we would start paying down the debt in 3 years' time.
So I'm not putting it on the never, never. I would start paying it down in 3 years.
Liz, that's simply not right. You promised almost £40 billion of unfunded tax cuts, £40 billion more borrowing. That is the country's credit card. It's our children and grandchildren, everyone here, kids, that we're going to have to pick up the tab for that.
Labour's Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, watched the debate. He says neither candidate showed the kind of leadership the country needs.
I think the debate we saw last night confirms that these are two political lightweights who supported, defended and enabled Boris Johnson to be the Prime Minister for the last 3.5 or so years. What we need is whoever wins to call a general election to give the British public the choice of a fresh start.
Archie Battersby's parents are vowing to continue their son's life support despite a legal ruling that treatment can stop. Appeal court judges say doctors at the Royal London Hospital can lawfully stop providing life-saving care. That could happen in less than 24 hours. The 12-year-old hasn't regained consciousness since suffering an accident at home in April. Yesterday, Archie's father was rushed to hospital with a suspected stroke or heart attack, but family say he'll be released later today. Well, Archie's mother, Holly, told GB News they're appealing to a higher court. The government doesn't know whether the coronavirus light travel system enforced on those arriving into the UK actually worked. That's the conclusion of the Public Accounts Committee, who say nearly £500 million was spent on quarantine schemes that caused huge confusion with 10 rule changes in a year. Arrivals from red list countries had to stay in a quarantine hotel for at least 10 days. Only 2% of those guests tested positive. MPs have accused energy regulator Ofgem of being negligent. The Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy says the government needs to change its out-of-date energy bill support for households. The Select Committee added that a massive insulation drive needs to be launched urgently, as it would permanently bring down bills. Energy expert Will Hodgson told GB News there are things we can do to cut our energy costs.
Britain has got the oldest housing stock in Europe, right? And we can take pride, I think, in having built houses that were made to last. But those houses are drafty. They leak energy. And if you can plug those leaks, you're going to save up to £600 from your bill. So the message of yesteryear was switch energy supplier to get the best price. I think the message going forward is look for energy efficiency so as to reduce your energy usage.
Increased drinking fueled by the pandemic could lead to thousands of extra deaths over the next 20 years. A study by the University of Sheffield found that people who were drinking at risky levels before the pandemic increased their alcohol consumption when COVID hit. The research scenario also shows that over the next 20 years, there'll be over 124,000 additional hospital admissions in men and 83,000 in women. NHS doctor, Dr. Frankie Jackson-Spence, told us one of the key concerns is that alcohol consumption remains high.
We've seen an increase in the number of alcohol-related diseases, hospital admissions and deaths from alcohol. In the first year after the pandemic, so in 2020, there was a 20% increase in alcohol-related deaths, and we haven't seen that statistic come down. So I think alcohol's another thing that's going to have long-term implications for people's health and the NHS.
Network Rail is advising people not to travel by rail tomorrow unless absolutely necessary because of another day of planned strike action. More than 40,000 members of the RMT union and 14 train operators are planning to walk out in a continuing dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. Network Rail says only 20% of services will run. Some places will have no trains at all. To minimise disruption, they published a special timetable showing many trains will start later and finish earlier. This is GB News, and I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
Well, if you watched the debate last night, it comes down to this. 0.2% of the population will vote on how best to bankrupt the nation on behalf of 65 million of us. Old Rishi Recession will be the only one able to buy togs, while Liz interest rates will be moving back in with her parents in Paisley when mortgage repayments hit a gazillion %. Reassuring, right? Well, other than who is most likely to rip through the economy like a wildfire, the rest of it was who hates China the most, Whose weekend job was the most grueling? Given there is barely a cigarette paper between them, other than when to actually cut tax, it was amazing. They managed to talk over each other so much, with Truss supporters accusing Sunak of aggressive mansplaining. Well, thank heavens, little Rishi has finally stopped beaming like a talk show host and has grown some manly grunt. I was worried if he became Prime Minister, even Joe Biden would eat him for dinner during a senior moment. And if Liz is going to get a word in edgeways if she's PM at her own cabinet meetings, well, she'd better install some ejector seats and menacingly hover over the trigger as she invites her ministers to talk. So one thing is quite clear. Far from having a top-notch new leader, Britain is about to get a rather sub-Prime Minister.
Under my plans, we would start paying down the debt in 3 years' time. So I'm not putting it on the never, never. I would start paying it down in 3 years.
Liz, that's simply not right. You promised almost £40 billion of unfunded tax cuts, £40 billion more borrowing. That is the country's credit card. It's our children and grandchildren, everyone here has kids, who are going to have to pick up the tab for that.
Rishi, that is not true.
There's nothing conservative about doing that.
Under my plans, we would start paying down the debt in 3 years' time. I don't believe this negative, declinist language.
It's your own
that we're
economic
hearing.
advisor, Liz. It's not mine. It's your own advisor.
I have lots of economists that are backing my plans. Everybody thinks that putting up taxes at this moment is going to hurt the economy.
Do you know what mortgage rates are in the US at the moment? Do you want to use them as an example? Their mortgage rates are almost 50% higher than mortgage rates in this country because they're borrowing so much.
I'm sorry, this is scaremongering.
Canada actually
this is Project Fear.
Liz, I remember the referendum campaign. I remember the referendum campaign, and there were only one of us who was on the side of Remain and Project Fear, and it was you, not me.
Okay.
And you talk
maybe
about
I've learnt from that.
What we do need to do is acknowledge that China is a threat to our national security. It's a threat to our economic security. And that's why, as Chancellor, I was pleased that we could put forward something called the National Security and Investment Bill. We also need to stand up for our values. And for example, when it came to Hong Kong, I was pleased to ensure that we put the funding in place to welcome to this country thousands of people who wanted to leave.
Rishi, I challenged you on this in the debate last week. As recently as a month ago, you were pushing for closer trade relationships with China. This is not something you've advocated in government. I'm delighted that you've come round to my way of thinking.
Well, it's like a fight over finger foods at a posh person's dinner party, isn't it? I'm joined now by columnist and Conservative political commentator Tim Montgomery. Tim, what did you make of last night's debate? Was there a clear winner?
Well, Alex, I'm really proud that I didn't manage to interrupt you during the question that you asked me. That seems to be the hallmark of a Conservative now, is not to be able to let anyone speak without interrupting them or mansplaining or whatever technical term we use. But I found it incredibly unedifying, to be honest. I think the Conservative Party, it's my party, it's the party I support. But at the moment, it does look like a party that's not treating itself well. It's not able, Conservative Party leader candidates aren't able to treat each other well. And I think a lot of the public will look at that and think, well, if they treat each other that way, how will they treat us? So I'm afraid the Conservative Party has a lot of work to do if it's going to try, regain the trust of the British people in time for the next general election.
I mean, it strikes me between these final two contenders, other than the big fight over when to cut taxes, there's not really much between them. It's just constant one-upmanship of, well, I noticed China was a bad actor before you. Well, I voted Brexit, but I'm the bigger Brexiteer. It just seems like a nonsense.
Well, look, I don't know what your opinion was of the other candidates that were in this race. I think a Kemi Badenoch versus Tom Tugendhat race would have been much more interesting. And I think it would have excited the grassroots much more. But we have the final two contenders that we have. There's no getting away from that. And actually, I think marginally on the issue that really does separate the two of them, which is the economy and the level of taxation, there is a real difference, Alex. That's perhaps where you and I disagree slightly. The fact is that Liz Truss has said that she will cut taxes from day one. She may not be able to deliver that instantly, But actually, over the first 2 or 3 months of her time as Prime Minister, she will cut taxes. And for your viewers now struggling to make ends meet, that's a promise that I think she will deliver and will make a practical difference to them. And I don't buy Rishi Sunak's claim that cutting taxes will somehow be inflationary, but all of the spending increases that he's agreed to while he was Chancellor weren't. Fiscal expansion, to use the term, favoured by economists, if you're increasing the amount of spending or you're cutting the amount of tax, they're both the same things. So why Liz Truss's tax cuts are more inflationary than Rishi Sunak's own spending increases is beyond me.
I mean, the alarming thing, and I alluded to it in my introduction, is both are accusing the other of potential economic apocalypse if their particular policy script is the one that's followed. I mean, that doesn't exactly reassure members of the public watching on.
Well, it's certainly a gift to the Labour Party as well. If I was a Labour Party researcher at the moment, I'd be making all sorts of YouTube videos based on these accusations that they've been trading. Look, the reality is that both of these candidates represent a risk. Rishi Sunak is saying that Liz Truss represents a risk because her tax cuts are inflationary. And, there is some truth to that. There is a danger in any path that you choose to tread when the economy is quite as vulnerable as it is at the moment. But there is a risk in carrying on with Rishi Sunak's path as well. At the moment, the danger is that Britain is becoming a low-growth, low-productivity economy. And Rishi Sunak's path of high taxes on businesses and individuals is also something that is a risk to the future of this country's prosperity. So Tory members will make their decision over the next few weeks and decide which of these two candidates is representing the risk that they're most happy to accept.
Tim, fantastic having you on the programme. Mansplaining conservatively wonderfully there. Thank you, Tim Montgomery, columnist and political commentator. Well, joining me throughout the show today is Benjamin Lockney, who's a research fellow at the Bow Group Conservative think tank. And I've also got with me former Labour Party MP Stephen Pound, who is going to share his thoughts on the Tory leadership contest. I mean, Tim Montgomery there saying this is a gift to the Labour Party, this internecine blue-on-blue fighting where they're both accusing each other of potentially being the authors of future oblivion. It doesn't exactly make one think, oh, yeah, the Conservatives seem like a good choice right now.
Well, the choice that I faced is between whether we use that as our next party election broadcast for the Labour Party or whether we use your intro. And it's a tricky one, but, I should put it to Keir, and I say we've got two very, very good options here. Look, I found it profoundly unedifying. We talked about the tax. We can talk about that in a minute. I mean, like it or not, if you suddenly cut tax quickly, then you've got the classic recipe for inflation. It's too much money chasing too few goods. Prices of goods will go up. It's an absolute classic. You couldn't, even Patrick Minford would accept that. But what I found really depressing and really unedifying was this prolier than thou. I slept on the floor of my chemist. I suffered, eating rats in Paisley, and then, in the living hell that men call Roundy in Leeds. And I've been to Ellen Road a few times, and it's not nice. But on the other hand, people aren't dropping dead in the street. It's not like it's sort of a medieval plague town. So I just found it very, very unedifying. And when I think that, to be fair, little Richie Rishboy, he did actually get one good round of applause for defending private education, which should go down very well with a lot of Labour MPs. But the bit there with actually starting to say his clothes cost, 1,500 quid. Her earrings cost. There's a thing in the Times today about Nadine Dorries having a pair of $6,000 diamond earrings. Have we come to this? It's like when we had Biden, and Trump. I thought, are there really no better people, 2.5 million people in the United States to represent, to be possible president? Are those the best we've got out of nearly 70 million people in this country? Could we not do better than that? What are you doing in 2 years' time, Alex?
I don't know, probably running the country by the sounds of things. I better start doing my homework on the economy. I'm not good at maths, You're
perfect for the Treasury.
Exactly, there you are. Are you good at maths? Because this is the big debate, isn't it? When to cut taxes. And certainly my other half works in finance, and he's terrified of Liz Truss. He thinks the thought of a, Trussonian government is going to bankrupt the nation. But, Tim Montgomery there making the other case, saying, no, under no circumstances is cutting taxes going to boost inflation. Actually, actually it's what people need right now. I mean, I don't know the answer. Do
Well,
you?
I think the key difference between the two of them is that Liz Truss is going for the I'll promise you everything, I'll promise you all the tax cuts, everything you possibly want, just vote for me, I'll give you whatever you want. And she's saying this not just on the economy, but on things like Rwanda. She said, oh, I'll do Rwanda, but more Rwanda. I'll send more people to Africa and we'll do it with more countries. And that sort of approach, people are a bit sceptical about because they're getting promised everything you want. You go, hang on, where's the catch? I think Rishi's gone too far the other way. He's trying to be too honest. He's saying, look, it's going to be tough. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to do that. People, they don't want to hear that either. They want a bit of reassurance. They want a bit of comfort, but they don't want to be over-promised. And I think neither of them are striking the right chord. You need someone who can say, look, things are going to be tough, but we're going to make the right decisions. You're not going to struggle. You're going to be able to heat your homes. You're going to be able to eat. We're going to make the right economic decisions, but it's not going to be easy. And that's what they need. And both of them are just on the wrong end of the spectrum.
And will your man, son of a tool maker, King Prole himself, Sir Keir, be able to really take advantage of this situation? Or do you think that there's still a problem there with Labour not offering themselves up as a viable alternative?
To be fair, he could go on holiday right now, as long as there's none of those Liverpudlian pension and monstering him by the poolside. Yeah. No, look, I mean, we do have a huge amount of alternatives. That we've got policies coming out of our ears, but most of it won't. Or quite clearly, you don't show all your cards. Just 2 minutes before the election.
Does he have any cards?
We do indeed. All ages.
Were they found in the bin at Chequers by any chance?
No, we play croquet. But, but look, the reality is that there is an economic argument there between the two of them. But what I find fascinating is that, as an outsider, I'm not, and I have never been a member of the Conservative Party, but Kemi Badenoch, who very few people had even heard of a couple of years ago, Tom Tugendhat, I've known for quite a long time, again, not massively well known. What a much better field we could have had if there'd been more options there. Now, you talked about wildfires and the Tory grassroots. Well, the Tory grassroots are on fire at the moment. They're furious. How many of them have tried to get Boris Johnson as a write-in candidate? It's like 10,000.
I think quite a few Tory MPs are probably looking at the last two and thinking, I should have run. If I didn't know it was going to be this bad. I didn't know there'd be such a bad crop. Anyone else could win against either Liz or Rishi.
I've got to go to an advert break. Did you know that?
No,
really enjoyed your chit-chat. Well, we'll carry on while they go and make a cup of tea. But thank you so much, Stephen, Ben. Also, I want to know your views. Of course, email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at GBNews, so I know what you really think. You're with GB News on TV and radio. Coming up, we'll be looking at the legacy of former Northern Ireland First Minister and Unionist Lord David Trimble, who died. Time for a short break now and a check on the weather forecast. Back in a bit.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A rather cloudy day for many of us with scattered showers. Not for all, however. There will be some places that stay dry and there will be increasing sunny spells later in the day. A ridge of high pressure is building in. Still the influence of low pressure towards Scandinavia, however, and cool-ish north to northwesterly airflow across the country. So a lot of cloud cover. Sunshine in short supply and scattered showers developing, most notably Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, into northern and central parts of England. There will be increasingly sunny spells developing later, especially for Wales and the southwest, and feeling pleasant enough with lighter winds compared with Monday. Temperatures reaching the low 20s in the south and high teens in the north. Into the evening, the cloud increasingly disappears. A few fog patches will form actually over, say, higher parts of Wales and northern England.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. You're with Alex Phillips on GB News. Now, some enter politics to be someone, others to do something. And it would seem Lord Trimble was a man who was only interested in what was doable, even when it came at a significant personal cost. And what a legacy he left. A Nobel laureate with a quarter-century of peace in his wake. A man who risked his political career and the safety of his family to deliver a once improbable agreement that ushered in a new era of stability following decades of bloody conflict in Northern Ireland. The author of the Good Friday Agreement. Well, let's talk now to my studio guests throughout the show today. Benjamin Loughnane, who's a research fellow at the Bow Group, a Conservative think tank, and Stephen Pound, who's still with me, former Labour Party MP and former Shadow Minister for Northern Ireland. Stephen, starting with you, what are your main thoughts on Lord Trimble and the impact he's had on the politics of the United Kingdom?
Well, that segment you just showed there showed a picture of him with Seamus Mallam and with Martin McGuinness. When I first met David Trimble, before the Good Friday Agreement, he was very, very big in the Orange Order, which is, in the fairly irredentist wing of the Orange Order. The fact that he would even be seen in the same room as Martin McGuinness, Seamus Mallam maybe, would have been unconscionable. People simply wouldn't have believed it. So he did that, and he knew the day he signed that agreement that the Ulster Unions, at that particular time, they had 10 MPs in Westminster. After that, the next election, they went down to 1. He knew what was actually happening then, so he took a huge gamble. But equally, so did John Hume, who accepted the Nobel Peace Prize. And so, to be honest, did some of the people on the Republican wing as well. When you think, Gerry Adams, for him, he actually had just as much hatred from his own side. Now, but with David Trimble, what I felt incredibly sympathetic to him for was the DUP hated, they called him the Trembler. They abused him and they insulted him all the time. And many of his MPs, in fact, two of the most famous ones actually left the UUs and joined the DUPs, including Geoffrey Donaldson, who's currently leader of the party and the previous leader of them. But I think we have to sometimes be a little bit honest. We can be sentimental, we can be misty-eyed, because, death is a great way to succeed in politics. And we tend to say that, what's that Shakespeare thing about the evil that men do lives on after them, the good is often interred with their bones. I think that the last couple of years, I really wish he'd done more in the House of Lords to actually go some way to resolving one of the most disruptive, corrosive and dangerous aspects of modern British life, which is the so-called Northern Irish Protocol. He could have spoken from a position of authority on that. He knows that 302-mile border from Donegal to Dundalk is unenforceable. He knows the reality of it. He's from Bangor on the other side, east of the Bann, but he knows the area. He could have done so much more. But perhaps at a time like this, de mortuis nil nisi bonum, let's just look to the good times. He made a huge commitment. He made a great decision. It cost him a lot. It cost his family a lot. But ultimately, it did the nation some service.
Yeah, Benjamin. It's interesting, isn't it? I was speaking earlier on GB News about this and his legacy and the fact that over the past few years, he's been really fighting the Northern Irish Protocol in the courts, trying to get it overturned and shouting loud, saying, as one of the architects of the Good Friday Agreement, this breaches it massively. It is a danger. And yet, at the time, nobody seemed to be listening. Do you think he could have done more, or should people have been paying attention?
Well, I think this is one of the problems with someone like Lord Trimble, who does an enormous amount in his time on something like the Good Friday Agreement. There comes a point where it's not his job anymore. Other people have to take the reins. He achieved something quite incredible at the time. does it then fall on him to spend the rest of his life, especially his last years, continuing to fight that fight, or should it pass on to other people? Should other people take the baton, as it were? Because when he leaves, when it, you know, as he has now passed away, who is there to continue his legacy? Who is there to continue that? And I think that's the problem. You need to have that sense of succession. But on the point that Stephen was making earlier, it's one thing to stand up against your political enemies and incur their wrath. It's another thing to incur the wrath of your allies and your friends by making a stand for what you think is right. So for peace, for example, and being seen to, you know, have sold out or gone with the enemy or whatever takes an enormous amount of courage. So I say, you know, fair play to him for that.
Both, thank you very much. I've got to move on because joining us now is Doug Beattie, who is the current leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. Doug, it's fantastic having you on today. I mean, it's an extremely sad day, but talk to us about the former leader of your party and his legacy in Northern Ireland. We're just trying to get in contact with Doug Beattie. I do understand that he's there. There he is. Doug, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I mean, Lord David Trimble, massive political figure in Northern Ireland, former leader of your party. Talk to us about his legacy.
Well, I think people need to understand that David came from a political generation along before my own, and he grew up in politically in troubled times in Northern Ireland. We had serious troubles and sectarian divide when he took over as the party leader in 1995. And when he took over as the party leader in 95, he was quite hardline in many ways. But one thing that David always knew is that nothing stops you making a decision and changing your decisions. And he understood that peace was the real prize here in Northern Ireland. And that's why in 1998, along with John Hume, and I say this often, as you can't mention David Trimble's name without mentioning John Hume, and the same way you can't mention John Hume's name without mentioning David Trimble. But together with others, they worked to get peace. And in 1998, they brokered the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which has given us the uneasy peace that we have now. But it has given us a pathway. It has given us a future. So when you look back at David's legacy, it's very easy to define, and everybody talks about defining what your legacy is. But David's legacy is very easy to define, because he put country before himself and his party. And he did so knowing that the knives would come out against him, and they did come out against him. But he stayed true and steadfast in what he was trying to achieve. And our party has suffered because of it, and he suffered because of it. But what is the price of peace? What is the price of a life? And there are people alive today who would not be alive because of the decisions that he made in 1998. A courageous man and a visionary who stuck to his guns through awful turmoil before the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and afterwards.
I mean, really touching words there. I want to ask you as well about, you know, in the latter years, he still stayed very politically engaged. My understanding is he was joining a group of people, a co-signatory on a legal case against the Northern Ireland Protocol. He was always committed, wasn't he, to making sure that that agreement that he wrote was honoured, and he was very concerned that it wasn't being.
Yeah, absolutely. And no matter which way you look at it, anything that undermines or damages the Belfast Good Friday Agreement is something that he would be against. And he was concerned at some of the things that were coming forward, some of them in regards to the protocol, and some others. The changes to the Belfast Agreement, for example, at St Andrews, were not positive changes. All of these things undermined in small parts the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. So he was steadfast in standing up for it, and he stayed politically active. Even during our Assembly election in March of this year, he came out and he canvassed with me. And he was very frail even then, but he knocked on about 50 doors and spoke to everybody who came out. And you could see that the fire was still in his eyes. He was surrounded by young unionists, and he really was fighting for peace. He was fighting for unionism, and he was fighting to make Northern Ireland work for absolutely everybody. He was committed and stayed committed right to the very end to try and end all forms of division, sectarianism and violence here in Northern Ireland.
And just briefly, Doug, what is your sort of abiding memory of the man, David Trimble? What was his personality like? Tell us about his character as briefly as you can.
Well, I think David is like most politicians, a little bit fragile at times, a little bit awkward at times, didn't always like the limelight, but was thrust into that limelight. But he was a very generous man, generous of his time, generous of what he could get other people to learn. And I remember him saying to me when I took over the party leadership, the loneliness of that leadership, and he explained to me what I should do. And I have taken that forward, and I will continue as the Ulster Unionist Party leader to fight to make sure that the Belfast Good Friday Agreement is not undermined.
Doug Beattie, it's really been an honour being able to talk to you today about your former party leader, Lord David Trimble. Doug Beattie, though, is the current leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. Well, you can email me. Do you have any memories or thoughts or tribute that you want to pay to the late Lord David Trimble? Do let us have them, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet them at GBNews. You're with GB News on TV and DAB radio. Coming up, 47 million people are on the brink of famine as 1/3 of the world's wheat is stuck in Ukraine. But missile attacks on the coast in the last hour cast doubt on the deal to get it out. Now, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 2:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The two candidates to become the UK's next Prime Minister will face off again tonight following a heated first head-to-head debate. The pair traded blows over tax, with the Foreign Secretary saying Rishi Sunak would lead the country into recession. But the former Chancellor claimed there was nothing conservative about Liz Truss's approach.
Under my plans, we would start paying down the debt in 3 years' time. So I'm not putting it on the never. I would start paying it down in 3 years.
Liz, that's simply not right. You promised almost £40 billion of unfunded tax cuts, £40 billion more borrowing. That is the country's credit card. It's our children and grandchildren, everyone here, kids. We're going to have to pick up the tab for that.
Public concern over inflation has reached its highest level in 40 years. A poll by Ipsos found that 45% of adults think it's one of the most important issues facing the country today as prices continue to rise. In particular, those aged 18 to 34 were the most concerned. MPs are criticising the government over its handling of the coronavirus traffic light system, which set the rules for those arriving in the UK. The Public Accounts Committee says nearly £500 million was spent on the scheme, but only 2% of those required to quarantine in hotels actually tested positive. The government also changed the rules related to border controls and quarantines 10 times. Network Rail's advising people not to travel by rail tomorrow unless absolutely necessary due to another day of planned strike action. More than 40,000 members of the RMT union and 14 train operators are planning on walking out, leaving just 20% of services running. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Shortly, we'll be back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
47 million people are already facing acute hunger around the world as tens of thousands, millions of tons of grain and fertilizer are trapped in Ukraine. Before the invasion, Russia and Ukraine provided 1/3 of the entire world's wheat. So it was utterly essential that a deal was made to get those stocks out and to the people on the brink of famine. Yet missile attacks in Black Sea coastal regions have raised doubts about whether Russia will stick to the deal. Under the plan, Ukrainian pilots will guide ships along safe channels in its territorial waters, with a minesweeper vessel on hand, but no military escorts. Meanwhile, Russia has been on what appears to be a bit of a misinformation tour of Africa, with the Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov heading to Ethiopia to no doubt lay blame for the impending food crisis at everyone else's door. Well, joining me now on the show is Mircea Babu, who's a journalist that's been in Ukraine since the war broke out. Great to have you back on. What is the latest with getting this grain out and the attacks that appear to have taken place along the coast of Ukraine, where the grain is currently stored and needs to be escorted to the people that need it?
Well, the latest on the ground, Alex, is very grim, to say the least. I've been touring the ports in Romania, starting from Constanța all the way up north. And I was actually a few days ago on the other side in Ukraine at a port city called Ren, where I talked to truck drivers. There you can find miles and miles of trucks waiting to be unloaded into barges. The problem with all this is that everything is moving too slow. These ports, the Romanian ports and the Ukrainian ports of Ren and Ismail, were never meant to be handling such volume as they are now. So what we're seeing every day is 5 to 7 ships, no more than that, trying to get into these narrow ports. Whereas on the Black Sea, where I was just 24 hours ago, I saw about 142 ships, big vessels, waiting to get into the Danube ports and load the grains. So at the moment, it all seems an impossible task for both Romanians and Ukrainians to get 60 million tons of grains out of Ukraine this year. So far, just Constanța, which is the largest port that helped Ukraine in this crisis since the beginning of the war, managed to ship out 1.2 million tons of grains out of Ukraine. That's absolutely nothing. 60 tons compared to 1 point is just not enough.
Yeah, I mean, a historic deal was signed between the UN, Turkey, Ukraine and Russia in order to guarantee the transit of that much-needed grain and fertilizer to places, for example, the Horn of Africa, who very much depend on that. And yet it seems to me that Russia has already broken the agreement, with yesterday bombing Odessa and reports in the last hour that there have been further missile attacks on coastal regions.
Well, obviously, that is the main concern, the security, the fact that you have to bring these vessels into a war-torn country, a country that is at war with Russia, that has missile capabilities. So that's one aspect, obviously the most important at the moment. But I've been speaking with logistic transportation managers in various ports, and they said it will take at least 3 to 6 months to get the port of Odessa, at least Odessa's port, ready to guide these vessels in and out. The demining process alone can take up to 3 months. And then you have the insurance companies who will be very reluctant. They say these logistics managers that I spoke with, they'll be very reluctant to insure these vessels driving into a mine port. And obviously, there's a question of security of the vessel, security of the people trying to get these grains out, and this idea of bringing a vessel into a war-torn country. Other than that, it's going to be impossible. They say they're going to create a corridor into and out of Odessa. But that corridor cannot accommodate. I don't see how it's going to accommodate 150 to 200 vessels a week. That's the traffic that was before the war in Odessa port. So from where I stand here on the shores of the Danube, it seems that the Danube is the only hope for Ukraine to get the grains out and for the world to be fed this year. The only problem is that it's all too slow.
Yeah, Murcha, thank you so much for coming back on the programme. Do take care of yourself, and thank you for that report. Really important topic that we need to be talking about. Benjamin, I'm going to come to you. I mean, it's a huge mission. Murcha, they're saying he can't even see how a passage to just Odessa can work now with the amount of grain stored up. But tens of millions of lives are dependent on that.
Yeah, it's awful. This story is so terrible. It really puts into focus for me the fact that last night we had this debate and they didn't mention anything like this. This didn't come up. This wasn't a question. What are you going to do about the fact that we might end up with a famine situation, not just here, but in places like Africa where they rely on that Ukrainian export? And instead it was all about what school did you go to, what clothes are you wearing, what earrings are your people wearing, who's this, that and the other. And it gets to the point where you think, how petty have we become, where we're squabbling internally when things like this are happening in the East, and people are going to starve to death, and it's not going to be great. And when winter comes, it's going to get much worse. In the summer now, things aren't too bad, but when winter comes, it's really going to be awful, and we're navel-gazing.
Yeah, and if you didn't know, Germany has cut the flow of gas, Russia's cut the flow of gas to Germany down to 20%. So if you thought things are bad now, pretty sure they're about to get a lot worse. Well, this is We Need to Talk About on GB News, and I'm Alex Phillips. Water everywhere. Or not, as the case may be, as dried-up Britain faces a possible drought situation this summer. South East Water has asked its customers to impose their own voluntary hosepipe bans to save the precious commodity. The aptly named National Drought Group is meeting today to discuss how a parched UK could cope with a lack of rainfall. Hosepipe bans for households could be brought in across the UK, and farmers could be restricted from irrigating their crops if the government implements a drought plan. So is it going to get hot, and do we need to start praying for rain? Joining me now is author and senior meteorologist at British Weather Services, Jim Dale. Jim, fantastic to have you on. Do you think we're heading into drought later this summer? Are we in drought already?
I kind of think we are. I mean, I'm speaking actually from a different country at the moment. You can probably tell because it's dark. But nonetheless, I spent most of the spring and summer in High Wycombe. And, you know, everything changed in terms of the grass colour. I mean, that's your first clues. You know, the river levels went low. And in that southeast quadrant, east to southeast, and particularly towards Southampton, there's been a dearth, a real dearth. And I can't remember in recent history the lack of rainfall that we've seen in these particular. It's not for everybody. The northwest of England, northwest of UK, I should say, has seen quite a lot of rainfall. It's not there so much, but the further south and east you go, now, memories of 1976 when I was a tiny boy, they come flooding back to a certain degree.
I mean, I remember from my youth there being hosepipe bans. I remember the news reports on that, but I haven't seen much of that in recent years. Is that because we've just become a lot better at managing our infrastructure when it comes to things like reservoirs, do you think? Or is that because there's been a particularly moist period in British meteorology of late?
I think you may be alluding to the 1990s, mid-1990s, when there's 2 or 3 years consecutively where we got a little bit of this dryness, if you like, and water companies were quick off the starting blocks in terms of putting in hose pipe bans and that type of thing. So I mean, maybe it's a good thing that they move in that direction quite quickly to prevent problems down the line, if that makes sense. But I think the period really for the last 20 years, I think we've seen summers that have been wet, some of that have been average, and average summers normally, give us enough rainfall to fill the reservoirs, fill the rivers, and keep everybody happy. This one is completely different. This one is a bit like we're in middle of France, if you like. This is the southern part of Britain. So maybe things have moved. I don't necessarily attach this to climate change. It was exacerbated by the obvious heat of the last few weeks, in particular the 40-degree. Massive evaporation rates caused that the levels of water, surface water, to disappear even more quickly. So it's a bit of a catch-22. The models that we look at going forward don't suggest any alleviation in the near future, and by that I mean the rest of July and perhaps even into early part of August. There is some hope, if we can put it that way, that the rains will return to the south, particularly as we move through August. So all is not yet lost, Alex.
Jim, fantastic to have you on the programme. I see you're in Thailand. Lucky man. Though it gets pretty sticky there when it gets hot with the humidity.
It's sticky, and we've had some rain as well. I shouldn't say that, should I, too loudly? But yeah, it's a bit of everything here, and I don't think there's any drought problems here at this moment.
Jim, you're making British people very jealous by talking about rain. Jim Dale, senior meteorologist. Nice to have you on. Ben, what do you think about this? I mean, it always strikes me when it comes to these big issues that we face, the companies always turn around and go, oh, it's climate change, oh, it's war in Russia, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, when basically they exist and take money from us to prepare for these things.
Yeah, I don't really buy into the doomsday scenarios. It's a great British tradition, really, isn't it, complaining about the weather. But I think from past years, what we know is that you get these heat spells and then you get thunder, lightning and buckets of rain. And I think, it probably will be the same thing over again. We've had a real hot spell recently. And I think, enjoy it while it lasts, because it's not going to be like that for very long. And very soon when it starts raining again, you'll think, God, I wish it was sunny.
I know, nothing more British than talking about the weather and then moaning about whatever the weather is doing. Benjamin, thank you. Well, now, could the Lionesses roar tonight? Is football coming home? Could they end 56 years of hurt for England in major tournaments? Will the women's football team claw in a record television audience? Well, enough of the naff puns now. England's women's team is prepared to take on Sweden in tonight's Euros semi-final. Could this be the team to end the wait? Joining us now is our reporter Ellie Costello, who's at a fan zone in London's Trafalgar Square. Ellie, what's the atmosphere like over there?
Good afternoon, Alex. Well, the atmosphere is already building here in Trafalgar Square in London. It's 200 miles away from where the Lionesses will face Sweden tonight at 8 p.m. But we're just under 6 hours to go. We can see that people are already gathering here and the excitement is truly building. We're going to give you a little bit of a tour here of the fan zone in Trafalgar Square. 5,000 people expected to turn out tonight. We can see these steps here, multicoloured steps. Lots of people will be watching the game from there tonight. And then they've even set up this little football pitch here in the middle of Trafalgar Square, and playing here right now are two teams. It's Bromley Bells and the Gold Diggers. I thought you'd enjoy that one, Alex. They're going to be playing here until 4 p.m. It's a fantastic profile for women's football. Lots of kids watching them and really enjoying that. And over here we can see the DJs and also some lovely deck chairs and beanbags. Fans already getting their spots. We can see the big screens up there as well, ready for the game tonight. And there's a lot of optimism and excitement here that the Lionesses could make it through to the final, which will be next Tuesday. They're really hoping they can do it. It's been a good start so far. They've swum through the group stages. They have beat everybody along the way. It was looking a little bit close against Spain, but they did secure a 2-1 win in the extra time. Actually, the Lionesses, they came through. So we're really hoping they can do well against Sweden tonight as well. It's going to be a tough match, though. Sweden are currently ranked second in the Euros 2022 team rankings. So it is going to be a tough match, but there's a lot of optimism that they're going to do well. It could be record numbers that are tuning into this game tonight. Suggested that there could be 14 million people watching the game tonight. And I thought you'd enjoy this as well. Waitrose Supermarket is saying where they usually see men stocking up on beer and crisps for the men's football matches, what they've seen selling out is rosé and popcorn. So 8 p.m. tonight we could see lots of people popping open a bottle of rosé, and hopefully lots of celebrations here at the fan zone in Trafalgar Square. But I will bring you all the excitement and all the build-up as the day goes along on GB News.
Great stuff, Ellie. Fantastic to have you on the show. Enjoy the atmosphere down there. Our very own Ellie Costello, our very own Lioness. Now, for the sake of the nation, I'm prepared to send my top producer to the aid of Liz Truss. Not being able to get in a word edgeways, she has perfected a withering look that would strike fear into the heart of any belligerent world leader. So before I go off air and come face to face with those cold, hard eyes, here's my pick of the rest of the news. It's been nice knowing you. So it turns out, apparently, women don't exercise enough. Half of us do no regular fitness at all. And it's all because of feminism, surely. Because back in the day, we didn't need to pay 100 quid an hour to a man called Kevin to help us tone our bingo wings using giant elastic bands and grunts. No, we had the mangle and the mop and the pedal-powered sewing machine and the frying pan to wave angrily at the men who now skulk around the gym like a pack of preening peacocks. And if you're off to the Costa del Qatar this summer, you may need to give your savings a going over, as Spain is set to demand tourists prove that they can spend €80 a day while on holiday, which at Puerto del Carmen in Lanzarote means 10 full English breakfasts washed down with 10 pints and 6 all-you-can-eat Chinese buffets with change to buy an I'm With Stupid t-shirt on the seafront. And I should know, because I spent my lockdown living in Lanza. It's a curious approach for a country in the middle of an economic crisis, famed for its affordable resorts, especially when come winter, when Putin turns off the gas to Germany, €80 won't even get you a squid sandwich. Benjamin, anything you want to add for the final dying moments of the show?
Well, that I didn't know about how cheap Lanzarote was. I'm going to be off immediately. I didn't know you could get that much for so little. It's incredible. I mean, when you look at the cost of living in the UK, maybe, and the heating, that's, the issue of the heating, maybe I might spend the winter abroad. It could be a good idea.
Yeah, makes sense, doesn't it? And are you going to be watching the Lionesses this evening? Have you been sort of captivated by women's football, or are you sort of...
I can't say I have, I'm afraid, but look, enjoy it while it lasts, because probably in the next few years you'll get quite a lot of blokes joining in the team as well, dressing up and ruining it for everyone. So, have your fun.
Oh, Benjamin, how very on message for this channel. And I mean, looking ahead to this summer and the leaders' debates, do you think that there's any chance that Sunak could pull ahead, or are we basically going to end up with Truss as PM?
Depends what stories come out over the summer. It depends what they've got, what dirt they have on each other and what comes out and how dirty they want to make the race. Because at the end of the day, they're going to have to work with each other after all of this. So are they going to go full pelt at each other, or are they going to try and go for the soft approach? I do think Rishi's got a good chance. I think as Liz is more in the public eye and she starts to have to sort of face scrutiny, I think her support will wane a little bit. And I think Rishi is adapting very well. He's noticed the criticisms of him, and he's changing. So, for example, we've seen as being mawkish and a bit childish. And so last night, that sort of mansplaining thing was actually, I think, him showing a bit of guts and aggression and showing that he's not going to just sit in the corner and go, oh, excuse me, yes sir, no sir. And he got a lot of criticism for it, but I think he reacts very well.
Yeah, interesting points there, Benjamin. Do come back. We always love having you on the programme. Benjamin Loughnane, ladies and gentlemen. Well, that's about all from me today. But coming up, of course, is the briefing with our one and only political editor, Darren McCaffrey. And Darren is here. Darren, I'm going to hazard a guess that you're going to be talking a little bit about the leaders' competition.
Yes, just a little. We'll be looking back at last night, whether there was a bit of mansplaining from Rishi Sunak or whether Liz Truss in the end won that debate, and looking forward, because there's another one in just a couple of hours' time, so we'll have all the political reaction to that. We'll also be looking back on the life of Lord David Trimble, of course very sadly died yesterday, and his impact on the peace process in Northern Ireland. And we're going to talk about fish and chips. I know it's only Tuesday, normally that's a subject for Friday, but apparently there could be a shortage. Half of fish and chip shop stores could close in the year ahead. Slightly worrying, because
that is worrying, Darren. That is worrying indeed. And I'm going to hazard a guess it's probably something to do with food crisis.
Well, you're going to have to wait and see. Stay tuned and you'll find out.
There you go. What a tease. Thank you so much, Darren. That's all I've got time for, though. So join me again for We Need to Talk About on GB News at the same time, 2 o'clock tomorrow. Coming up next, as you already know, it's the glorious Darren. But first, here's a little look at the weather. Bye-bye and have a great evening.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A rather cloudy day for many of us, with scattered showers. Not for all, however. There will be some places that stay dry, and there will be increasing sunny spells later in the day. A ridge of high pressure is building in. Still the influence of low pressure towards Scandinavia, however, and cool-ish north to northwesterly airflow across the country. So a lot of cloud cover. Sunshine in short supply and scattered showers developing, most notably Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland into northern and central parts of England. There will be increasingly sunny spells developing later, especially for Wales and the southwest, and feeling pleasant enough with lighter winds compared with Monday. Temperatures reaching the low 20s in the south and high teens in the north. Into the evening, the cloud increasingly disappears. A few fog patches will form actually over, say, higher parts of Wales and northern England.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics.